Hello, welcome to week 6 of quarter 3, believe it or not. This is, of course, if you're watching, you missed either one or both of our synchronous Zoom call days. So, this is going to be going over what we did in those Zoom calls. So, just to let you know, there is a lot that we're going to try to do. Let's see if I can explain this. So, with the week that we missed from the power outages and how things are kind of shifting and changing because of hybrid starting, which I'm going to talk about briefly, we will not have as much time in this quarter as I would like, which means that our poetry unit is not going to be all that I had hoped for in terms of timing. We're going to do our best. We're going to have a growth mindset about it, and we're still going to have fun. But I just want to let you know that we have a lot to get through today and this week in general. So, first off, of course, as always, don't forget your assignments from last week. Still turn those in if you haven't yet. This week we have week 6 Google Slides, which is what you're looking at. This week is going to be, I will say, the only time that you will ever have 2 asynchronous assignments to complete. So I would suggest completing one of these on your first asynchronous day and then one on the second. If you want to just knock them both out at the same time, go for it. I would say the first one will probably take you 5 minutes to do, maybe less, I don't know, 5 minutes. And then the second one will take a little bit of time, but I'm hoping that it'll be fun. It's something that I think you will enjoy. So, I will go over those at the very end of class or the end of this video. Okay, so 2 other things. We are technically halfway through quarter 3, and parent-teacher conferences are happening next Monday. So if you know that your parents or guardians are planning on participating in that, now would be especially a good time to check in on your grades. You will, of course, see points and things assigned, graded on Canvas, but if you want to find the most accurate grades for this class, go to Student View, because when I try to sync Canvas to Student View, Canvas just doesn't always cooperate. So Student View is going to have the most up-to-date and accurate grades, and I grade every single day. I'm constantly working through the assignments that are turned in, so you every day should see the most accurate grades. Especially if you check by the end of the day, that would be the best time. So be looking at that. If you have concerns, please let me know. I want to help you. I want to make sure you're getting back on track if you've fallen behind a little bit. So let me know about that. The other thing that I want to show you is this brief announcement on going hybrid in quarter 4. So I've linked here in the slides a link to our school website, and this is an announcement that your parents should have received last week. It's very fresh information. So the gist of it, we will be going back to school hybrid starting the beginning of quarter 4, which is mid-April. So for you, as grade 9, you will be going back. Your start date to go back hybrid is April 13th or 14th, depending on your cohort day. So that is about a month away now. You can also note, I believe it has some information on here. If you or your parents, guardians feel uncomfortable with coming back to hybrid, to my understanding that you can still remain remote at home and participate, because we're not just going to get rid of Canvas all of a sudden. We're still going to use it. So I don't have all of the details on that, but if you need more, if you would like to figure out some more things along those lines, let me know. I would love to get you in contact with a counselor or answer whatever questions I can. But just know that hybrid is starting mid-April, which is the start of quarter 4. If you haven't already, I would take a look at this. It gives you an idea of kind of what the schedule is going to be like, so it'll shift a little bit. They're telling us that our class periods are going to be about an hour long, so a little bit shorter than right now, and that's for things like cleaning in between class periods and stuff like that. So there's a lot that's going into this. I'm sure you have a ton of questions. We have a ton of questions because this is new and we haven't done this before. So I just want to say, as a reminder, give yourself some grace, give your teachers some grace. all of the admin at school, we're trying to do our best to make this a seamless transition. But of course, this is brand new and we've never, ever done this before. No one has, because I really don't think anyone in our lifetime has dealt with a pandemic like this and going to school. So there's information here on the school website. Check it out. I just wanted to let you know about that. So we have about a month from right now before that happens. Okay, so that is this week. We are starting a poetry unit, which I am very excited for. So let's get to it. Also, two things I wanted to share, fun things. First off, volleyball. I know that I have a few of you freshman girls that are playing volleyball, and you may or may not see me soon because I volunteered to help with scorebook. So I thought I would share that because I'm excited. I can't wait. I used to play volleyball in high school and loved it, so it'll be really fun to get back to it. So if you play volleyball, I will see you soon. The other thing that I wanted to share is this book. I know, again, Star Wars, you may or may not be sick of me talking about it, but this is a really cool book and it connects to what we talked about last week and the week before with short stories and learning about point of view and perspective. So this is a book kind of like fan fiction where they tell short stories from different things that happen in the Star Wars original stories, but they tell it from the point of view of a side character. So not a main character, but a character that already does exist, but they're just kind of a minor character. So it changes the point of view of a story. And I thought that was so cool and I wanted to share it. So if you love Star Wars and you're interested, check it out. I think it's awesome. I started reading it recently and it's really cool. So, okay, those are my two fun things. Now, let's get to it. Let's get to poetry. I am so excited for this unit. I wish we could get to all of it, as I would hope and dream that we could, but of course with time constraints we can't. But we're going to do our best. And again, I would just encourage you to approach this with a growth mindset. So, poetry, let's get to it. These are the questions that we want to answer today, meaning the first half of this video. What is poetry? What makes a poem? And what does poetry look like? Why is it awesome? So, these are the questions we're going to be answering. So I want you to pause this video and answer these questions. Tell me, what is poetry? You can use these sentence stems if that kind of helps you get going. I just want you to tell me everything and anything you know about poetry. How would you define it? How would you describe it? What is it? So go ahead and do that. All right, so you have written your response here. Let's keep going. Poetry. I'm sure you wrote something along the lines of this. Poetry is a genre of writing that expresses vivid emotions and ideas. It is a very creative genre of writing that incorporates poetic devices, figurative language to demonstrate those vivid emotions and ideas. We're going to be learning about the devices and figurative language in the second half of this video, which would be the second synchronous day. So that's poetry in general. It's just writing that expresses emotions and ideas. So now what I want you to do is you are going to watch this video from TED Ed. It's just a couple minutes and it's about what makes a poem, what is poetry, and then you're going to answer these three questions after you watch the video. Top three things that you learned or thought was interesting. So any three things in that category. So go ahead and watch that video and respond to this prompt. All right, so we've covered what poetry is, what it kind of consists of. Now let's think about, what does poetry look like? I'm sure you kind of have some ideas in your head, maybe some fun children's poetry that you remember looking at when you were in elementary or maybe even middle school. But let's see if we can't expand our knowledge about what poetry can look like. What's the possibility there? So I'm sure this is something along the lines of something you thought of. A few number of lines, a few stanzas. There's not a whole lot of words in terms of bulk on the page. It's not like a completely, it's not like a book, okay? So it's fewer words. But poetry can also be something like this. So these are a few different authors that I have to share with you. Jason Reynolds, Jacqueline Woodson, and Elizabeth Acevedo. They're amazing. So these are novels, young adult novels that are written in poetic form. So this, let's see if I can go back here. This page right here is taken out of Jason Reynolds' book, Long Way Down. So these are stories that are told using poetry, which I think is so amazing. And I would say that if you consider yourself not a reader, that's not something you love, but you want to give it a shot and you want to see if you can find something that you really like, maybe consider poetic books, because I know that for a lot of us, just we don't like having to sit and read for a long time. The amount of words can be intimidating, but of course with poetry, there's not as many words. It's fewer lines and paragraph stanzas. So these are amazing. You can see that I put the handles, I think is what they call it, Twitter handle, Instagram handle. So you can find these writers. They're real, living today, breathing. They're creating stuff constantly, and they're really awesome. So poems can be formed into books, novels. It can also look like this, and I'm sure you've been familiar with maybe the term spoken word. Spoken word is kind of a form of verbal poetry being performed out loud. So what I want you to do is you're going to watch this video. This is Brandon Leake. He recently won America's Got Talent last year, I believe. And he is a poet. That's what he won the whole show for, being a poet. So you're going to watch this video, and then I want you to go to this slide, and you're going to tell me one thing that you noticed about his poem, his performance, one thing that you liked, and maybe a question you have, something that you were curious about or you didn't necessarily understand. So you're going to watch this video and respond to these 3 prompts, and then we'll keep going. Okay, so wow, that was awesome. Brandon Leake's amazing. He has a lot of good stuff. If you remember from Advisory a couple weeks ago, he was involved in that Beyond event that we did. So if you haven't really gotten a chance to see what he does, it's awesome. And that was just a small portion of it. So the question we now need to answer is, why is poetry so incredible? And I'm just going to kind of run through these lists, or these bullet points with you, bullet point list. So first of all, you can say so much with so little, which I think is fascinating. I don't know necessarily how the genre of poetry came to be way back when, but it's amazing how much you can say with so few words. If you think about kind of that cliche saying, reading between the lines, that's often what poetry is. There's a lot happening, but you don't necessarily see that written out. The other thing that makes poetry so amazing is just your freedom to be creative. You can express yourself in so many different ways. And I'll show you in a few slides what that kind of looks like. The other thing about poetry that's awesome is it doesn't always have to rhyme. I know for a lot of us that kind of roll our eyes and want to gag when we are told that we're going to learn about poetry in school. We think about like classic children's poems, rhymes that are really cheesy and corny, and poetry doesn't always have to rhyme. It really doesn't. It can rhyme, and it can be awesome and really powerful when it does, but it doesn't always have to. And then lastly, the genre is just so diverse. I'll show you in a few slides what I mean by that. But for this slide, you can see this is Morgan Harper Nichols. She is incredible. She does kind of graphic design and poetry for a living. She's on Instagram and Twitter. I would highly recommend that you check her out. She's got some really great stuff. This is just one poem that I pulled from hers to share with you. It's one of my absolute favorites. So go ahead, take a look, read that, and then keep moving on to the next slide. Okay, so this is your first 1 out of 2 asynchronous assignments that you have. It's called My View on Poetry. So I'm going to go to Canvas. So it should look like this when you open it up. So the whole goal of this assignment is for you to tell me where you're at currently. I'll read this. I know poetry can bring up a wide variety of emotions and reactions. Some of you hate it. Some of you love it. Some of you are just confused by it and you don't even know what your feelings are about it. But I want to have a better understanding of where you stand now with poetry so that for one, I can make the unit amazing and awesome and interesting, and also so that I can answer your questions and clarify things that would maybe make you not really love it. So you're going to write a short response answering all the questions below. How do you feel about poetry? Have you ever had a bad experience with it learning it in school in the past? What confuses you the most about poetry, and what is something you would like to learn more about? So you can do this in a text entry, Google Doc, whatever. You just need to answer all 4 of these questions. So that is your assignment for your first asynchronous assignment. And like I said, it'll probably take you 5 minutes, not super long. So, okay, now we're on to day 2, synchronous day 2 of week 6. So these are the questions we're now going to answer after looking at what is poetry, why is it awesome, all those things. So how does understanding poetic devices help me analyze poetry and interpret meaning? What types of poetry exist? What are the elements and devices used? So we're going to look at those questions and try to answer them today. So first of all, why are we learning about all this stuff? Oftentimes, when we're in school, we don't really get that question answered. Why? Why does this matter? Why should I care? Why should I not tune you out, Mrs. Albritton? Well, this is all, I don't know if technical is the right word. Devices, figurative language, different types of poetry, these things might on their own seem a little bit boring or just kind of tedious, but I promise you, once you get a good understanding of these things, looking at poetry itself is going to be so fascinating, so interesting, and so much more engaging because you have an understanding of these tools. So here's a metaphor that I like to think of that's helpful. So if you're thinking about sports, whether you are an active athlete and you play sports or you don't play sports and wouldn't consider yourself an athlete, but you're at least familiar with what they are, we all know that with sports, there are rules to the game. There are boundary lines on the court or on the field. There are referees and scorebook keepers and all those people that help to keep track of the game itself. And those things, when you're looking at them isolated alone, they're not interesting. They're boring. Lines on the ground, a referee with his hands up, a scoreboard, none of that's interesting. But in order for us to actually enjoy watching the game itself or playing the game, we have to know the rules. We have to know where the boundaries are at, because that gives order to the chaos. Because if you were to go watch a football game or soccer game, whatever, and there were no rules, people were just making up stuff as they go, no one was keeping track of score, that would be so chaotic and frustrating to watch. And that's how I want you to view poetry. If we don't get a good understanding of these things first, trying to read poetry is just going to be frustrating and feel like nonsense because we're just not going to know what the rules and boundaries are. So I hope that's helpful. That's what I like to think of. So we're not going to spend too much time on this slide, but I do want to just show you how diverse poetry is. There are lots of different types, different genres within poetry: blank verse, rhyme poetry, free verse, epics, narrative, haiku, pastoral, lyric, ballad, soliloquy, sonnets, elegies, odes, and limericks. That's just a handful, and they're all different. You can kind of see the little lines that I have giving you kind of just a brief idea as to what they are. So some of these poems have rhyme schemes. Some of them have kind of rhythms and patterns, A, B, B, A, like limericks and sonnets. Some of them are just super open and free, like free verse, narrative poetry. There's not a whole lot of things constricting the rules to it. So again, if you've ever been taught a poetry unit in the past and kind of thought, this is awful, I hate it, part of that might be just because you were looking at poetry that didn't really appeal to you, and that's fine, because there's a wide variety of different poems out there, and hopefully we'll give you a chance to see some that are not so lame. So, okay, now we're going to look at the tools, the techniques, those rules and boundary lines in sports, in our poetry. What is figurative language? It is language that is not meant to be taken literally, but to enhance meaning or emphasis on a topic. So there's a lot, and we don't have time to look over everything, but we're going to look over the 6 that I think are the most important or most common: similes, metaphor, personification, oxymoron, hyperbole, and idioms. But first, I want you to tell me what you know. So in this slide, you will see text boxes. You can just start typing and editing. I want you to tell me everything and anything you know. And again, if you are coming up short and you can't think of what it is or can't remember, just tell me that. Be honest. I don't want to know what Google knows. I want to know what you know. So go ahead and do that. Pause this video and fill out these slides. Okay, so you've told me what you know. Now let's see if we can match that or extend what you know. Similes. These are probably the most easy to identify. They're very common. And what I want you to do is play this song, look at the lyrics, and I want you to tell me what similes you see in the song. Similes are when you use like or as to compare something. So you're going to find a few in here, and I want you to write them down. Go ahead and do that. Okay, we're going to use more music. So metaphors. Metaphors are similar to similes, but they're just done differently. So metaphors will compare something to another thing in a way that's not literal, and that comparison just adds to the description of the object. So you can see some examples here. Laughter is the best medicine. She's just a late bloomer. His heart of stone surprised me. His heart isn't literally made of stone. He's not literally buried under a sea of paperwork. These are metaphors that are not literal, but they kind of just give some emphasis on the description of whatever you're looking at. So I want you to watch the first part of this video and pay attention to where you see metaphors in Michael Bublé's song, Everything. Okay, next we have personification. This is when you describe something that is not human with human characteristics or qualities. So anything that is an inanimate object, pencils, a book, a car, your alarm clock. You can kind of look at those examples on the bullet point list. It just kind of gives you a creative way of looking at something when it's, again, not literal. Personification is not literal. Okay, next, I know this seems rapid fire, but we have a lot to get through. So next is oxymorons. This is when you bring together two contradictory words for a specific effect. So these words alone or together, when you see them, they're going to be kind of opposites, but when you bring them together, they create a new meaning. So big baby, open secret, passive aggressive, an original copy. These things really don't literally make sense, but they kind of create a new meaning. So I want you to look at that list and see if you can come up with any other more oxymorons. Two words that are opposites, but you bring them together and they create a new meaning. Okay. Excuse me. Next, we have hyperbole. So hyperbole is all about exaggerating, being dramatic, and again, not being literal, but you're just being dramatic. So if you're a fan like myself of The Office, Parks and Rec, you will see lots of hyperboles in the dialogue and the situations that happen because oftentimes it'll create humor. So you can look at this list at some examples that I have for you. Okay, now we have idioms. These are a little bit more difficult to pin down because there's just so many and they don't necessarily fit like a pattern or a box. But idioms are basically phrases that people use to communicate something that's not literal. So you could also think about maybe, what's the word I'm looking for? Geographically, there's going to be certain things that we say in Oregon that you wouldn't hear someone say in Texas and vice versa, or New York versus California. There's just phrases that we say and they don't mean what they literally say. So for example, when you are going to a friend's performance, they're in a play and you say break a leg, you don't actually mean break a leg, you just mean good luck. So I want you to think about any idioms that you hear frequently from family members, friends. You can look at this list to get some ideas. Okay, I know this is rapid fire, but stick with me. We'll come back to this and refresh our memories. Other poetic devices. So we've got repetition, alliteration, imagery, symbolism, tone and mood, and onomatopoeia. Some of this will be familiar because we've kind of talked about it a little bit in our short story unit. It translates over. Some of it will be newer. These are things that you will find are in poems specifically that help with all the figurative language that's also being used. So first we got repetition. This one's easy. It's just when you repeat something. Words, sounds, shapes of the poem, anything that you think needs to be repeated. Oftentimes this will be used to create a rhythmical effect. Alliteration. This is when you repeat either the first letter or the first sound in the beginning of a word to create a rhythm, a pattern. So you can see this in The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. We're using W's, Q's, Q sound, ends to create kind of a pattern as you're reading it. Then we have imagery. This is all about using figurative language and devices to paint a picture in the reader's mind. So you want to write your poem in a way that the reader feels like they're in that moment with the character, with you. So this is an example from, it's a really intense poem, but it's very impactful. This was written by a soldier who died in World War I, and he describes his experience doing so, being a soldier. So take a look at that. Okay, symbolism. Not much time on this one because we already covered it in short stories. Symbolism is, again, when you take objects that represent an idea or a topic, something that's physical, tangible, to represent something that's kind of invisible. And then tone and mood. We did talk about this. This is all about the emotions and the feelings that the writer intends the reader to feel. So we will often find with poems, this is a huge aspect of it because, again, poetry communicates vivid emotions and ideas, and tone and mood are a huge part of that. Okay. Almost done. So now we have onomatopoeia. This is words that describe sounds. So boom, splash, clank. It kind of mimics the actual sound itself. So sometimes the words might kind of look ridiculous, but that's because it's mimicking the sounds. So Rice Krispie treats, snack, or snap, popple, and crack. Those are examples of onomatopoeia. Okay, lastly, your second asynchronous activity is a figurative language scavenger hunt. So let me show you the instructions for this. So if you go into Canvas, week 6, you should see something like this. So the whole goal of this assignment is to find figurative language or poetic devices in the real world. So I want you to look around at things that you do for fun in your pastime, and you're going to find an example. So this is the list of everything that we covered. It's a lot, and please read the instructions carefully. I'm not asking you to find something for every single one. I'm asking for just one. So you could pick. You look at this list and say, I want to find imagery. Great. That's all I need from you is just one. Again, not one of each, just one. I know that seems kind of underwhelming, but that's the point, underwhelming. So you're going to find an example, places to look, song lyrics, TV shows, movies, Twitter. You're not only supposed to look there, but those are just some ideas to get you started. And then you're going to share that with me. You're going to tell me what figurative language element it is, and then explain how you know that, and also tell me the source of where you found it. So that is your asynchronous number 2 assignment. And that is all I have for you. So again, I know that was a lot. We're trying to kind of get the intro of this unit really packed in there because we don't have as much time as I would like. But if you have any questions, please let me know, and I will see you next week.